So, are cats just small dogs with short ears? No, they're not actually. They are really quite different than dogs and humans. And really what I'm going to focus on today is their diet, because if you feed them like a dog, dry food that they can munch on whenever they feel like it, you have a high risk of ending up with an obese cat with a lot of physical and some behavioral problems that are part of that. So let's feed them like real cats. Cindy, thank you for coming. It's excellent to see you here, and I hope that this is valuable to you. And anybody, by the way, who likes what they're hearing and is valuable, please hit the heart button. And if you can hear me loud and clear, hit the wow button, because that's really quite valuable for me. I have these two boys here. This is Tony, and this is Gaston, the two Nickel family cats. I am Dr. Jeff Nickel, in case we haven't met. I'm a veterinarian, and with many, many years in general medicine, and I'm now, having completed my residency in behavior medicine, that's my specialty, although all these other body systems come into play with my work, not the least of which is the behavior problems that we'll sometimes see with these cats. And you know what, Carolyn, would you hand me an indoor hunting feeder? There we go. This is one of these things. I know I've shown this before. Gentlemen, Tony T, look. This is, you guys know, you know what? Let's put a couple of dry kibbles in this thing. Here's the other one. What I've done with these things, this is a food toy for cats. They work at it and extract their food, and of course it's got this little outfit on it and with a plastic insert, and you can put dry food in it. And what I'm going to do, thank you, is, here boys, is I'm going to show you what these cats will do with these things if they have dry food, or canned for that matter. And I'm going to talk about the differences here in just a minute. So, you know, I want to do these Facebook Live events because it's a great way for people to learn and ask questions too. So if you have anything comes to mind throughout this thing, whether it has to do with feeding your cat or has to do with obesity or any physical or behavioral problem, by all means interrupt me with a question and I'll be happy to do that. Drew's here. Excellent. Thank you for coming, Drew. Drew is a rescuer of greyhounds. Really valuable work, because a lot of those dogs would get put down if it weren't for people like Drew and his good wife. So, let's talk about the natural diet for cats. You know, in the wild, and you know, truthfully, they are largely wild creatures that we keep as pets. And they are genetically programmed to take in a high protein diet with a moderate amount of fat and low in carbohydrates. And this is important because their livers are not constructed to handle a lot of carbohydrates. So why is that so important? Well, if you get a good dry diet, including something like this Royal Canin diet, let me show you this real quick, because I like this diet. Well, actually my cats like this diet. There we go, Royal Canin. And this is a kitten food. And you might say, well, these don't look like kittens. Well, they're not kittens. Tony, he's going to be 14 years old in November, and Gaston here, he's about 4 years old. But marketing has a lot to do with pet foods, and when we look at the dry diets, they all have more carbohydrates than a cat should have, and by relative comparison, they don't have enough protein. So consequently, you can get cats who pack on the fat and they end up muscle wasted. So everything we feed our cats is kitten food. And it's appropriate for healthy cats of all ages. Now, if your cat's on a special diet for some internal problem like kidney disease or an intestinal problem, the list goes on, heart disease, there are special diets, especially urinary disease. Very important to use an appropriate diet. Prescription diets are going to be best for those things. But this diet right here is what I have fed these two boys their whole lives. And this is, it's hard to find canned kitten foods. This is made by Science Diet. And they make a few different flavors. These guys seem to do best on the savory salmon. Well, what's important about this is that it is almost exactly got the protein, carbohydrate, and fat composition of a rodent. And that's what they are genetically programmed behaviorally and physically to consume. You know, in the wild, you don't see cats, you know, having, you know, mashed potatoes and rice. They don't grow vegetable gardens to, you know, have a balanced diet that we consider healthy, it's a different thing altogether for these guys. And when they eat a creature in the wild, they eat the whole thing, but it's a high protein, moderate fat, low carbohydrate diet, and they do best as pets if they get something like that. And here's, Gaston, he's turned around the other way, but he's going after this indoor hunting feeder, and he's working on the frozen canned food that I have in there, canned kitten food. So let's talk about what can happen, and I'm going to tell you an interesting story. You may remember it was in the news. The joint pain is one of the things I see commonly in my behavior consultation practice, and the cat parents are not aware of it because joint pain and discomfort and diminished athletic activity in a cat can be something that develops very gradually, and you can miss it. But if you look back on your cat's life and you say, well, when he was a youngster, he used to jump a lot better, and now he has a hard time and maybe doesn't jump at all. Well, all those years of obesity and just gradually accumulating weight not only puts more load on those joints, but there's an inflammatory process that occurs in the body with that excessive weight, and that is what is the primary cause of inflammation in the joints, the itis, the arthritis, and it becomes quite painful. And there are some very good treatments nowadays for painful cats with these rough old joints. But one of the best things we can do for them is safely and slowly diminish their weight, which, by the way, I have always done by asking people to switch over to a much higher protein diet. And we'll talk about the difference between canned and dry diets with respect to what cats will actually eat. Here's another body system that's a real problem. Many years ago, when I graduated veterinary school in 1974, we hardly ever saw diabetes in cats. In fact, we had a treatment method for it. We had insulin and dosages and that sort of stuff. But it was extremely hard to get our arms around it, and many of those cats at that time didn't do well. And part of the problem was that there was very little experience with it. Well, nowadays, people are, they're gone all day. Everybody works or goes to school. And so you've got these cats who make great pets, in part because people consider them easy to manage, easy to keep, and they leave out dry food for them. And the cat snacks on this high carbohydrate diet, and it has to be, by the way, because the kibbles in dry food, they are, they're baked, and like a biscuit, they've got to stick together, and it's that starch, the carbohydrate, that does that. And we give it to our cats. In fact, Carolyn, would you mind handing me a little bit of dry food? These cats have been raised on this canned food their whole lives, but I've always been a believer that not the low protein nature of it that attracts them, it's the texture. They're really like, Tony, a little piece of canned or dry food fell on the floor there, and Tony, you had to jump down and, snack on that thing. I mean, look at Gaston here. He was working on the indoor hunting feeder, having a good time with it, but I put some dry food out, and it's dry kitten food, so it's higher protein than regular dry food. And, they can't quite get enough of it. Here, Tony, you can come on up here and enjoy a little bit of dry food. Carolyn, would you hand me a little bit more so these guys don't compete over it? And we'll put some for Tony as well. So anyways, we've got problems with diabetes with dry food. Well, there, Tony fell. He's back down to the floor again. Anyway, the problem with diabetes is you get all of that carbohydrate and starch that they are not really built for, and it triggers a lot more insulin production and release by the pancreas than ever should be occurring. And you can actually burn out the islet cells in the pancreas, the insulin producers. And when that happens, you get rising blood sugar levels, and you get cats who might start to drink and urinate more volume. So you might notice a fuller litter pan, or the cat going to the water bowl more often. And then they become less active, and as they get really sick with diabetes, they start to lose weight, and they can go to pieces and die. So they typically nowadays respond much better than they used to insulin treatment. But one of the principal parts of diabetic management in cats is a high protein, low carbohydrate, moderate fat diet. And in fact, many of these diabetic cats, we've got to watch them carefully. But as we gradually diminish their weight with the appropriate diet, their needs for insulin reduce as well, to the point where in some cases you don't need insulin anymore. And in essence, if you can maintain their normal weight, which is no more than 10 to 12 pounds, depending on the frame of the cat, these two little guys are about 8.5 pounds, then you're very likely to never see the diabetes again. And Darren, I'm a brand new cat dad, and I love your videos. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Nancy, it's Nancy from Ottawa. I'm a rescue of Keyson's elk hounds. That's wonderful. You know, I love it when people do that stuff. You know, you're saving a life. By the way, there was a new research project, if I can digress for a minute, talking about how much better behaved dogs are when they are in foster homes and how much better they do behaviorally if they're taken out of shelters and put in regular homes until they can find a permanent lifetime home. And so people who foster are, boy, you're doing the right thing, because it's behavior problems that land these cats and dogs in shelters in the first place. And that's why people return them, because they don't know what to do. So thank you for that work. That's tremendous. And the other problem, back to cats for a minute with their diets, is that when they're on these carbohydrate-rich dry diets for long periods, then what they tend to do is infiltrate their livers with fat. And if you look at the microscopic sections of these things, you'll see these little round globules interspersed among healthy, normal liver cells, just diffusely throughout the liver. And there's so much reserve capacity in anybody's liver that nobody seems to know, and there's no reason to worry about it because there are no symptoms until some stress comes along in that cat's life and they stop eating, which is often something they do when they get sick, regardless of the cause. And when they do that, some of these cats with fat-infiltrated livers nosedive, and if they stop eating for 48 hours or longer, their liver can go into failure. And if we get them fast enough, we can turn these cases around. We surgically implant a feeding tube, because the most important thing we can do for a cat who's crashing with fatty liver disease, even though they're obese, is to get food into them, or they'll die. And we support them with fluids and all that. So, you know, obesity, it's a killer. And from a behavioral standpoint, if you have a cat who's supposed to be a natural athlete and be able to jump high and jump and play, and, you know, these feathers on a stick toys, this kind of stuff that, you know, bring out the little predatory creature in cats. Oh, nobody's going to swing at this thing because they're looking for food on my table. They can't do that stuff. And they can become frustrated, and we see more aggression in cats who are prevented by their bulk, by their obesity, from engaging in natural behaviors. They tend to be more aggressive. They're more prone to urinary disease. So obesity, not our friend. So let me read you a little story here. Excuse me, Tony. There we go. This is a cat who was in the news a few years ago. A morbidly obese cat named Meow, pretty inventive name, made national headlines. An extreme example of preventable suffering. It was inappropriate feeding that led to this sweet cat's early death. Meow was portrayed as a cute anomaly by the press, but in truth, he was actually terminally ill. So, dry feline diets were founded on the belief that cats are really just small dogs with short ears, kibbles conveniently packaged in odorless pea gravel or star-shaped nuggets, made owning a kitty almost as convenient as a houseplant. But heavy on starch, carbohydrates, and proportionately weak in meat, protein, dry diets have fostered a burgeoning population of muscle-wasted, dangerously corpulent cats with arthritic joints. Livers that are infiltrated with fat. Hepatic lipidosis, the medical name for fatty liver disease, is often fatal in a species that should be lean and mean as it prowls the wilds in search of hapless rodents and wounded birds, which is nature's way. Diabetes, a once rare feline disease, is now almost as common as hairballs. I have to take responsibility. I wrote this. I put it in my newspaper column in the Albuquerque Journal, but I thought it told a valuable story for this. Canned kitten food is best for healthy cats of all ages because it has the right amount of protein and is appropriately low in carbs. This is not my opinion. Research confirms studies published years ago. Cats require a feline-specific diet. Because it's not baked with starch, it smells kind of funky, and it comes in a can. And it costs more than dry, which is another reason that dry diets are popular, and I get it. So if your cat is fat, over 10 to 12 pounds, again, depending on the size of their frame, but in otherwise good health, he can lose a lot of that blubber and build muscle by snacking from a can on demand. And one of the beauties of feeding canned diets to cats is that you can feed it to them on demand. You don't need to measure it at all. And if they have been overweight because of eating too much dry food, then they gradually lose weight very slowly in a very healthy and appropriate way, and they self-regulate. So you don't have to like, oh, how much canned food? How do you measure canned food? You generally don't have to worry about that at all. Now the problem, by the way, can be getting a cat who's got a lifetime of eating dry food to switch over, and it can take as long as a year to very gradually mix a little bit of canned food in with the dry, and get the cat willing to eat some of the canned food that's stuck to the dry kibbles, and then very, very slowly phase out the dry food and phase in the canned. And again, even these two little guys, you know, we only give them the dry food as a treat. In fact, sometimes when it's time to put them to bed and, you know, they're out in the yard or they're roaming around the house, we don't know where the heck to find them, we get out the dry food and we put it in a little plastic bowl and shake it, and boy, they come running and go right to bed. So, you know, they love it. Again, it's the texture from my perspective. So, sick, fat cats are a different story. A liver loaded with fat can fake it until its owner loses her appetite. That's the owner of the liver, which is the cat. In just 48 hours, a rotund cat but seemingly robust kitty can die from liver failure. Intensive medical care, including emergency surgery to implant a feeding tube, saves some. Others can die tragically and quickly despite the best medical efforts. Damaged livers do better long term on a prescription reduced protein diet in some cases. So, you know, everybody's an individual. Cats have become increasingly popular in part because more of us are away from home for longer durations. If you listen to my diatribes with any regularity, you already understand the importance of an enriched indoor environment. Now you know what to feed. Well, it turns out that over 35% of pet cats are overweight or obese. That's huge. Too corpulent and uncomfortable to run, climb, and jump, fat cats live diminished lives. Now here's another one, and this is a conflict, and we have to walk this line, but sterilization, neutering, and spaying is one of the reasons. It causes a problem. Of course, all my pets are spayed and neutered, but there is a reduced need for calories, and so we feed them the same amount and they put on the weight. And so sometimes, typically research has shown that if you spay or neuter your pet, you have to reduce its food intake by 30%. And again, if you're going to feed dry food, you better measure it, or you can feed them canned food on demand. So, you know, it's these multiple small meals that makes a difference. And there's often somebody at our house, but even when there isn't, you know, if nobody's here for 8 or 10 hours, they're just a little hungrier when we get home. And they've done very, very well with it. And one of the best things you can do is these food toys, like an indoor hunting feeder, this kind of thing. This little mouse, you'll see it, you'll find it on the internet. And it looks like a mouse, and these cats will, you know, they work with it because it looks a lot like their natural prey, and they're meant for dry food, but I put canned in it and then I freeze it for them. And they've done very well with it. And Renee, oh, thank you for tuning in, Renee. I'm just so happy to see you because you've been here before. And by the way, let me see, this is, yeah, thank you. Okay, so anyway, this is what I wanted to explain to you at this point, is that these food toys, here's another one. This one's called a twist and treat. It's made for dogs. And you can put dry food in it, or you can put canned food. And I'm a real believer in pets working for their sustenance. So I like to put canned food in this kind of thing, or these indoor hunting feeders, and I put them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer. And that way when they come out, they don't make a big mess, and these cats just work all this loose. Yeah, Darren, wow, I had it all wrong. I've been using the canned food as a treat. Yeah, don't feel bad. Almost everybody makes that mistake. And I would just suggest that you gradually convert them. Canned cat food of any sort is going to be superior to dry. But again, I go with the kitten food because it's almost exactly the nutritional comparison to what's in a real live rodent. It was interesting. Oh, excuse me now. We're not going to play that game, gentlemen. Now, in speaking of weight, by the way, I'm a real believer in weighing cats. Tony here, this little gray guy, he has recently developed a little dental problem. And we're going to get dental x-rays and probably have to extract a couple of teeth. I've been keeping his teeth clean through his life. But I've been weighing him. And I have this postage scale. It's a digital postage scale, and you think, well, gee, that's pretty small. How the heck are you going to get a cat to stay on that? Well, you sometimes see a cat who, sits like with their little feet and their little paws, and he'll actually sit on this scale if I make it real easy for him. Here you go, Tony. Will you do it for us? Just have a seat there, little guy. If you're, he's not going to do it this time, or maybe he is. Yeah, I've got one more foot. There. Whoops. Anyway, if you work with them, you can weigh a cat accurately, right down to the 1/10 of an ounce, and you want to do that because this can be a matter of life or death. So when you look at the nutritional makeup of cat food, look for protein over 40%. This canned kitten food, 44%. And you can look for fat and carbohydrate percentages as well. But if they're high protein, frankly, they don't have a lot of room left for carbohydrates. The fat's usually going to be around 16%. Carbohydrates, 28 or so, but 44%, over 40%. And we sometimes will go to like PetSmart or Petco to get canned food, and we buy it by the case. And I came up to the check stand with a case of cat food, and the young lady at the desk says, "Wow, a lot of kitten food. How many kittens do you have?" I said, "Oh, I have 2 adult cats. We feed them kitten food because it keeps them healthier." So that's really what I have to report today. If anybody has any other questions, by all means, you're welcome to send me questions on my Facebook page, and I encourage you to go to my website. It's drjeffnicol.com, drjeff, Nichol, and if you do, I'll send you my free at-home pet first aid and CPR guide, and every Tuesday in your email box, you will get my weekly media blog, comes from my Albuquerque Journal column, and you'll get my Facebook Live video. And so if that's convenient for you, you can certainly sign up for that. It's no cost, of course, and you can get that. And next week, we're going back to dogs. We're going to talk about puppies and what their special needs are in terms of getting them started right. That's a big subject, so we're going to touch on some of the important points. But for people who have a puppy or are considering one, by all means. And these Facebook Lives, some of this information that I share isn't necessarily, you might have friends that might need it more than you do, and you should feel free to tag your friends on this thing. So look for me next week, 6 o'clock Mountain Time next Thursday evening. I guess that'll make it 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much for tuning in. And there's Tony. He's working on the indoor hunting feeder here. He says, as that stuff thaws, it's pretty good. And they make these things so you can put both canned and dry. And by the way, if you're going to transition a cat from dry to canned food, you can mix them in these things. And the cats will reach their paws in there, push these around, beat them up real well, just like a real rodent, and feel a lot more like a cat than they would if they wanted to snack from a bowl of dry food. So thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week. And, Rosemary, I'm a mama to 2 kitties, and this is very helpful. I certainly hope so. One of the hardest things about practicing veterinary medicine, and I'm sure this is true for physicians on the human side, is when somebody comes in sick, and you go right to work. But if it were preventable, you go, it can be a little frustrating because you want these pets to do well without your help, really. We've all got plenty of work. And so if we can keep some of them healthier and avoid some of these, frankly, catastrophes, and diet can matter a lot. All right, thanks. Have a great week.